Hey everyone, so I'm going to do about half of the problems on the Unit 4 Part 2 test review. This part is going to feel much shorter than the other part because there isn't as big of a span of things you need to know how to do. For the most part, you need to know how to factor if there is a number in front of x squared, and you need to know how to use synthetic division to do various things. One is to determine if something is a factor. One is evaluating. Finding the roots is another one. If you're given a root and using your graphing calculator to find the root that does work so that then you can use synthetic division. So notice how this problem doesn't tell you one of them. You're going to want to use a graphing calculator to decide it. Okay, and I'm actually, for those of you who are remote, I will be using Desmos, which is the only website I'm okay with you using to find those zeros. But I do still need to see your work too. And then down here at the bottom, finding polynomial inequalities. So factoring if there's a number in front, division and all of its synthetic division and all of its extensions, finding the rest of the zeros after synthetic division by factoring, and polynomial inequalities. All right, so when you are factoring and there is a number in front, you need to take the first number and the last number and multiply them. This makes 60. And I now need to find two things that multiply to 60 that adds to negative 16. So they both need to be negative. And then I just start with 2 and 30. And then I go to 3, and that would be 20. And then I would go to 4, and that would be 15. And then I would go to 5, and that would be 12. Then I would go to 6, and that would be 10. So those are all my numbers that go into 60. And it's kind of a long list on this one, but the quicker you can write that whole list, the easier it is going to be for you to kind of just quickly glance through and pick the two that add to negative 16, which is negative 6 and negative 10. The reason why this type of factoring is tricky is because you don't go straight to the parentheses. Instead, you split it up in the middle. So instead of negative 16x, I have negative 6x and negative 10x. We're not changing the problem, we're just splitting it up so that now I have groups that I can factor by grouping with. So over here, I can divide these first two both by 3 and x. So I'm going to put that in front of my parentheses. 3x squared divided by 3x is just simply x. Or you can think of it as these two things should multiply to get this. Negative 6x divided by 3x is negative 2. And then I have the right side. Over here, 10 goes into both of those. Since you don't want the first thing in the parentheses to be negative, I'm going to take a negative 10 and put it in front. And I'm sorry this is going to be a little bit scrunched, but negative 10x divided by negative 10 is just x. And 20 divided by negative 10 is negative 2. So you'll notice I have an x minus 2 in both. That's going to go out front. And if I take that away from both of these, all I have left is 3x minus 10. And all this problem said was to factor. So these are my factors. I am done. I don't need to solve it unless it says solve. On number 2, I'm going to do the same thing, except for now I need to know what multiplies to. 3 times negative 8 is negative 24. So only one of them needs to be negative this time, since it's a negative 24. 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. And I would want to pick negative 2 and 12 because that's what adds to 10. So I would be splitting it up into negative 2x and 12x. All right, notice how these two stayed there. and the 10 just split up into -2 and 12. Then I'm going to factor by grouping. I can divide both of these by x, and I have 3x minus 2 left. It just pretty much takes away a power. And over here, I can divide these both by 4. 12x divided by 4 is 3x. -8 divided by 4 is -2. My 3x minus 2 is matched, so that's my first factor. And the outsides, or what's left if I cross those off, is x and 4. Don't forget to put a plus sign in between those. And there you go. If you are trying to determine if something is a factor, what you're going to do is take what would be the zero of this factor. So whatever number would make it 0, in this case, that would be 4. It's always sort of going to just be the opposite. And then if I'm trying this polynomial right here, I'm going to put the coefficients out next to this. 3, -17, 22, -8. Then drop this first number down and take whatever numbers are down here and multiply them by the number in the box, which is 4. So 3 times 4 is 12. And then put that in the next column and add these together. That makes -5. Take this new number times 4, that's -20. Add these, 22 plus -20 is 2. Take that number times 4, that's 8. And look at that, these add to 0. This right here is the remainder. If your remainder is 0, that means that this went in perfectly. And if it goes in perfectly, it is a factor. So my answer to this one would be yes. Don't forget to say yes or no on these. If your remainder is 0, it's yes. Anything else is no. So your remainder has to equal 0 for yes. Okay, then the next section says use synthetic division to evaluate each function. So for example, right here it says f of -2. This is the number that you put in the box. You don't need to flip it or anything, just that number. And whatever you get for your remainder is your answer. You could also take -2 and plug it in for x like this. But honestly, that's going to take a while. So we're going to find the answer to this by using synthetic division. So remember, after you put your number in the box, put your coefficients. 1, -5, -7, 4. And I didn't leave you a whole lot of space for synthetic division on purpose. It doesn't take a whole lot of room. Drop this first number down, and then multiply it by the -2. That's -2. Add these together. That makes -7. Multiply that by the -2, and that's 14. Add these together. -7 plus 14 is 7. Times -2 is -14. And 4 minus 14 is -10. That is your remainder, so that is your answer. If I had done this, I would have gotten -8 minus 20, which would have been -28, plus 14, which would have been -14, plus 4 would be -10. But that took a lot more brain power than just doing my synthetic division real quick. So to evaluate, all you have to do is just use the remainder. So you don't have to figure out what this quotient would be, you just care about what the remainder is. And then we're going to do a little bit of working backwards. So this next part says find the value of c in each polynomial below. That will make the division have a remainder of 0. So what we're going to do is synthetically divide, but you'll notice we don't actually know what number is there yet. And I'll explain how to kind of work backwards. So if x minus 3 is on the bottom, that means 3 goes in the box. And then I'm going to write the coefficients that I do know. And instead of writing C, I'm just going to leave a big old box. Okay, and what's going to happen is, we're going to have to work this from both sides. So I'm going to start like normal, but eventually I'm going to get a little bit stuck, and I'll show you what to do when you do get a little stuck. So this first number drops down, that's a 1. 1 times 3 is 3, 1 plus 3 is 4. 4 times 3 is 12, negative 17 plus 12 is negative 5. And then negative 5 times 3 is negative 15. And I don't know where to go next because I'm missing the number that I'm adding it to. But I do know that my remainder has to be 0. So if I want this to be 0, then the number right here would have had to be a 3. And if that's a 3, I need this to be a number that multiplies by 3 to equal 3, which is 1. Then my very last piece is, what number minus 15 equals 1? 16. And that's my answer. C would have to be 16. I'll probably do one more of these in an extra video if that was a little much for you. And then the bottom part says, use the given root synthetic division and factoring to find the remaining roots. So I'm actually going to start off with the bottom left because it has a fraction. The one that it's giving you is the one you need to put in the box for synthetic division. Don't freak out because it's a fraction. Also, if you're doing this from home, from the PDF, I will have fixed this. It's kind of wonky right now. This is supposed to be x cubed, x squared, and so on. But my numbers out front are 2, 1, negative 26, and negative 13. Drop the 2 down. And then this is the part where people freak out a little bit. Negative 1/2 of 2. Work on the signs first. A negative times a positive is a negative. And half of 2 is 1. But now look, those add to 0. So it doesn't matter what I'm multiplying by. 0 times anything is 0. Which leaves me with my negative 26. A negative times a negative is a positive. And half of 26 is 13. And then you have to finish solving. See how it says find the remaining roots? This isn't just dividing, you have to actually find the rest of the roots. Before I can start factoring or anything, I have to put my variables back in. This is always your constant, x, and x squared. So you really have 2x squared minus 26. If you wanted to factor this, there's only 2 things. All you can do really is take out a 2 from both of them. And you would want this to equal 0. That means that x squared minus 13 equals 0. So you would add that 13 to the other side, and x squared would equal 13. Then you take that square root on both sides. Don't forget that whenever you do that, you need a plus and minus. There is no square root of 13, so it just stays. So those are your remaining roots. Because that counts as 2, the positive and the negative. That makes the third root because it was an x to the third power. And on the back side, it just doesn't tell you what number to start with. So you are going to have to figure that out using your, there's my classroom, using your calculator. So I'm going to pull up my calculator. Okay. What you're going to do is hit this y equals button and go type in this equation. So I'm going to do the first one, which is 4x to the power of 3. Hit the right arrow so it goes back down to normal. If you don't, it's still up there like an exponent like this. So it even tells you, it gives you a hint, hit the right arrow. Minus 7x squared. And the x I'm using, by the way, is this button right here. Here's the caret button. Minus 5x plus 6. And then instead of hitting graph, go to zoom first. Come down here and pick a Z standard, or just hit the number 6 is fine. All right, so it looks like it might cross right here at -1. It crosses almost at 1 right here, but it looks a little off, so that might be a fraction. And it looks like it might cross here at 2. I'm going to start with the -1. The whole goal is that we just found a possible 0, one that we think it is from the graph. And then we're going to use synthetic division with it so that we can finish factoring it. So the difference here is it didn't tell you which one to start with. You had to graph it on your own to figure out which one to start with. And then I'm going to use synthetic division. I'm not going to explain this out loud a whole lot because I've already done like 3 synthetic division problems. Drop the first one down, multiply, add these together, multiply, add these together, multiply. And we got 0. That means it's a 0. If your remainder is 0, f of -1 would equal 0, so we got it right. Now what we have to do is turn this back into a polynomial and factor. So constant x squared. So I have to factor the equation 4x squared minus 11x plus 6. So I need to find 2 numbers that multiply to 24 and add to -11. Since it's positive 24, they both have to be negative. Otherwise, they wouldn't add to a -11. So 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. If you're not sure what goes into 24, start with 2, then 3, then 4. And -3 and -8 are my winners because they add to -11. So you're going to split it up in the middle. And factor by grouping. I can take an x out of these two, but that's about it. And I have 4x minus 3 left. Over here, I can take out a 2. Since I don't want this one to be negative, I'm going to actually make that a -2, which will turn it into 4x. And 6 divided by -2 is -3. So my 2 parentheses match, meaning 4x minus 3 is my first factor. And the outsides, or what's left if I cross those out, is x and -2, or x minus 2. And then you do have to actually find the rest of the roots. This one would be positive 3. Because of that 4 in the front, you have to divide it by 4. Okay, imagine if you were setting this equal to 0, you would add the 3 to the other side and then divide by 4. So it's 3 divided by 4. This one, if you set it equal to 0, you would just be adding 2 to the other side. That's just 2. So all of your roots are -1, 3/4, and 2. Always add this one back over here so that you can make sure you have 1, 2, 3, because it was next to the third power. Then we are to our inequalities. I'm going to do one of each type. This one's already factored, this one is not. If it's already factored, list your zeros first. So this one would be a double root at 2. This one would be -3. And this one would be 4. Okay? All this negative out here does is it makes it go down on the right side. So then I'm going to sketch myself a graph. -3, 2, and 4. And I'm going to go ahead and put open circles because this is less than but not equal to. This negative makes the right side go down. And 2 is a double root, so it's going to go all the way through 4. But then when it gets to 2, it's not going to go all the way through. It's going to bounce back up and then go through -3 like that. This says less than 0. That means that my answers are the parts that are less than 0 or below the x-axis. So this one goes left forever but stops at -3. So that would be -infinity to -3. This one starts at 4 and keeps going to the right forever. So that would be 4 infinity. Since we don't have any closed circles, I'm going to use all bracket or all parentheses and put a U in between. On the next one, I have to actually factor this. So I'm going to take an x squared out of the first two, and that will leave me with x minus 5. On the right side, I can divide these both by 3. Since the first thing is negative, I'm going to make that -3. -3x divided by -3 is just x. 15 divided by -3 is -5. My parentheses match, so I have x minus 5. And if I cross those out, I have x squared minus 3 left. That means I have zeros at 5. And this one would be 3, but we have to get rid of squared. So it's going to be plus and minus the square root of 3. Don't let that freak you out. It just means that when you go to draw your graph, you need to put negative square root of 3, square root of 3, and 5. Just pay attention to the fact that 5 is bigger than the square root of 3, so it goes on the end. Hey, this time I get to draw closed circles because it is greater than or equals to. It's got the little line. There's no negative out here in front, so the right side is going to go up. And none of these are doubles, so it goes all the way through. Since this one does say greater than, I want the parts that go above, which is here and here. From negative square root of 3 to the square root of 3. And from 5 and beyond, which is infinity. Since these are closed circles, I use a bracket wherever I had a closed circle, which is on everything except for the infinity. Okay, for the next part, I'm going to show you how to do this in your calculator once you already have it typed in to y equals. So hit y equals on your graph, type this equation in, and when you get that, you're going to go down to Zoom Standard. Once you can see your graph, you want to find all 3 zeros, which you know because it's x to the third. Go second, trace, 0. Left bound means you need to go to the left of it. So I'm right here to the left side, hit enter. On the right bound, go until you're just past the 0 and hit enter twice. So -2.5. And then do the same thing. Second trace. Here. And here. So that's -1. And then second trace. Go down to 0. Now I'm to the left of this one. Hit enter, go to the right, of this one. So I'm just past it. And that gives me 0.5. For the minimum, you're going to do the same thing, but pick minimum. This is the minimum right here. So go to the left, enter, go to the right, enter twice. And I'm going to write down both negative 1.3 and 5.19, negative 5.19. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the maximum. This is the maximum right here, so I'm to the left, enter, to the right, enter twice. Negative 1.87, comma, 5 point, the 6 is going to round this to 2. Okay.